everybody. Welcome to The Public Interest. We're joined today by Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who is running for president in 2020. I'm really glad to have you on the program.
It's great to see you.
So there is so much to discuss with you, and I've been meaning to have this conversation with you even before you ran for president, but you have a very interesting trajectory running from Hawaii, building a national platform. In many respects, we saw you as a rising star in the Democratic Party because you were the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. And then you stepped down from that. You supported Senator Sanders in his run for president. And since then, you faced challenges from your own party. So I'm curious, give us your perspective on your run for president and what you faced so far, because certainly I've seen folks within your own party that are perhaps not supportive of this run.
Yeah, well, my focus has been and continues to be on how I can best be of service to the people of this country. I'm a soldier. I've served now for almost 15 years in the Army National Guard, deployed twice to the Middle East, and throughout the over 6 years that I've been in Congress, have served on the House Armed Services Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, Homeland Security Committee, and through all of this experience, I know the cost of war. I know who pays the price. It is our veterans, it is our service members, it is also every single American. You know, the trillions of dollars that are spent on failed, costly regime change wars, trillions of dollars that are being spent on this new Cold War and nuclear arms race. These are all dollars that need to be spent on serving the needs of our people right here. This is why I'm running for president. I want to bring these soldiers' values to the White House, these values of service above self, restoring honor, integrity, and respect back to the presidency, and to end these wasteful regime change wars, this new Cold War, nuclear arms race, so that we can use our precious resources exactly where they are needed in serving the everyday urgent needs of our people.
But I want to go back to you serving on the Democratic National Committee in 2016. What was that experience like, and why did you resign at that specific time? Because, you know, as I recall, being at the DNC on day number one, Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned. I actually interviewed Senator Kamala Harris on first day, and she kind of minimized the impact of having the head of the DNC resign on day one of the convention. But obviously, you resigned months before DWS resigned. You saw something, so what did you see and what can you share with us?
Well, first of all, there were a lot of issues and challenges that we were dealing with within the DNC. It was never a position that I sought out. When I was elected a new member of Congress, I wasn't there but a few weeks when I was approached saying, hey, would you like to serve in this position as vice chair of the Democratic National Committee? I thought if there's a chance that I could do some good, then I'll do my best to do so. What it really came down to for me in 2016 was, as a soldier and a veteran of 2 Middle East deployments, there was no way that I could stand on the sidelines throughout that presidential campaign when there was such a contrast between Secretary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders in their foreign policy views. Secretary Clinton having voted for the Iraq War and having very strong interventionist foreign policy views. Senator Bernie Sanders, who voted against the Iraq War, with more of a non-interventionist leaning. So I resigned from the DNC because as an officer, you can't take sides in a presidential primary. And I wanted to make sure that these issues about the cost of war and the consequences of regime change wars was heard in this very important debate about who gets to be our commander-in-chief, because that is the most important responsibility that a president has.
But since that time, some of these folks in that Democratic establishment, and I'll bring up an Indian American voice, Neera Tanden, who runs the Center for American Progress. She has definitely taken some shots at you, certainly on Twitter. And here you are, both ostensibly liberal women on the same side, trying to oppose President Trump moving forward in 2020, no matter who the nominee is. But she's taking shots at your position, namely because of your trip to Syria. I see that is the invective that she uses. But what can you do to get more of the party establishment behind you? Because it does seem like there's a lot of the folks that have been traditionally supportive of Hillary Clinton and folks of that ilk that may not be behind this candidacy.
Well, I would turn the question around and challenge those in Washington who are attacking me because I'm against wasteful regime change wars. I'm against increasing the suffering of the people in these countries where we wage these wars. I'm against making it so that our troops pay the price for these wars. And I'm against wasting trillions of taxpayer dollars to pay for these wars that end up making things far worse off for the people in those countries, far worse off for the American people, and undermining our security by strengthening Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I'm against all of those things. This is a main reason why I'm running for president. I would challenge Neera Tanden and any of these other people in Washington who are criticizing my views and ask them, why do they support regime change wars that strengthen Al-Qaeda? Why do they support regime change wars that increase the suffering of the people in these countries? Why do they support wasting trillions of taxpayer dollars that we need to pay for healthcare, education, infrastructure, housing, basic needs of our people that must be addressed?
Isn't that how the machine works, though? I mean, I've spent some time in Washington. I happen to run businesses that are regulated by the government. The Federal Communications Commission oversees what I do. I have run into all kinds of bureaucracy, with all due respect to Chairman Pai, who's been very friendly to me personally and our businesses, but it's a challenge working with the government and seeing the largesse, seeing the waste. The common person does not deal with Washington. They do not see the expenditure on the military. They do not see the expenditure on all the infrastructure and all the contractors. So how can you change that culture? I mean, you're talking about systemic change that, you know, you're one person, but that whole governing body of Congress needs to step up as well.
You're exactly right. This kind of change we're talking about requires that systemic foundational change and courageous leadership to make it happen. I know you've experienced this through all of your work in Washington, and you've seen how there is this bubble around Washington and the quote-unquote powers that be who are so disconnected from the reality of what everyday Americans are going through. Whether you're a small business owner or you're a student or you are raising your children at home, there are so many of these issues that Washington is so far out of touch with. And this issue of ending wasteful regime change wars, ending this nuclear arms race, and taking that money and using it to serve the needs of our people is one of those issues. This is where there's opportunity. Yes, there's challenge, but there's opportunity because people all across this country, Democrat, Republican, Independent, realize and understand how urgent this change is needed. And will support the leadership required to make that change. We cannot forget where the power in this country really lies. Washington thinks it's in their hands. People in Washington, self-serving politicians, think that they are the ones who hold the power, when in fact it is we the people and our voices who hold that power to make the systemic change that we need to see.
Do you think running for president at this time, with the approach that you're taking, is the way to A, win the Democratic primary, and B, defeat President Trump?
Yes, it is. But we have to understand that this is bigger than an election. The issues that I'm raising are issues that are central to our very existence. Understanding and knowing that we are at a greater threat of a nuclear catastrophe today than ever before in history is an issue that should concern all of us because it threatens our very future. It requires that courageous leadership to understand the threat and to be able to take those steps to de-escalate this crisis that we are facing, to end this nuclear arms race and use those resources where we are needed. So this election has to be more than how to beat one person, how to beat Donald Trump, because what's more important than that is how do we best serve the people of this country? How do we put their interests and the interests of our country and our future at the forefront? That is the uniting message, that is a uniting need that we need to address, and that I'm looking forward to doing so throughout this campaign, and if I have the honor of being elected president, actually putting that into action.
Well, I'll give you credit for coming on our program, and I've seen you on many other programs that showcase different viewpoints, including places like Fox News, where if you're a Democrat, a lot of folks say you shouldn't go there. So I give you credit for showing up in venues and trying to talk to people of all ilks. But I think one of the challenges we do have is that folks talk over each other. I don't see any communication. I interview a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans. When I get together with them on a one-on-one basis, they all seem like regular, nice, genial people. And then we start talking about politics and their viewpoints, and all of a sudden, it's vitriol. What can be done to change that? I mean, again, you're one person, and if anything I know, I mean, being president is very powerful, but you do have to work with a greater governing body, and you're right now in Congress. How are you able to assuage some of these differences you have with the other side, and how do you plan to bring folks into the fold to follow this agenda that you want to set?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've done throughout my time serving as a member of Congress for over the last 6 years, in building relationships with people, just like we do in our everyday lives, and looking at each issue based on its merit, looking at the pros and cons, looking at the substance, and not thinking first, oh, well, I've got to be against that because it's a Republican bill and I'm a Democrat. Or Republicans saying, well, I got to vote against that bill because it's a Democrat bill and I'm a Republican. The challenges that we face in this country and the hopes and dreams that we have are very much the same across our communities, whether they are largely Democrat or Republican communities or people who may not affiliate with one party or another. We're talking about having a safe place for our kids to grow up, clean air for them to breathe, clean water that's not going to poison our people, and to have that opportunity forward for a path towards prosperity. When we build these relationships, as I have done throughout my time in Congress, with fellow Democrats and Republicans, that's based on mutual respect for each other, that provides the opportunity to have rigorous debate, to really talk about, hey, here's how I feel we can solve this issue. Tell me what you think. And actually listen and say, okay, I like this idea, maybe not so much that one. Let's see where we can work together to bring about a real solution. I think this is the kind of thing that we do in our everyday lives. This is what leaders in our country must do, to put the well-being of people before their political party, to actually fulfill the trust and the promise that has been made to their constituents, and put serving the people before their own self-interests.
Of course, most of your colleagues are taking money from different factions that have a vested interest in moving their agenda forward in Washington. How does that culture change?
By people demanding change, people demanding that accountability, and that their elected leaders will serve their interests, without any shadow of a doubt that there may be other special interests who are influencing their actions. We've got to make it so that members of Congress are not taking contributions from PACs and lobbyists, from these special interests who essentially pay for a seat at the table to write policies that best serve their boss or best serve their interests, leaving the people behind. We see how this big money special interests influence is impacting the policies that Washington is passing in almost every single industry. That's what's got to change. And we're already seeing now more and more people who are running for Congress and getting elected, even just in this last 2018 election, have made that promise and commitment to their constituents and have run their campaigns without any PAC or lobbyist contributions.
You've changed your stance when it comes to LGBT relationships, and it's conjured up a lot of controversy, as well as your stance on visiting Assad in Syria. So I'm not going to get deep into that, but I want to find out, if you're elected, what is the thing you're going to tackle first on day one as president? What is the most pressing thing? Because certainly regime change wars, you can work with the Secretary of Defense, and you can work with Congress to slow down our interventions globally, but what are you going to do for the people from day one?
I will do exactly that. That is for the people, and that is something that must be addressed on day one. This is not something that is just impacting people in other parts of the world. Ending these wasteful regime change wars is essential to make it so that we have the resources to make sure that everyone has able to get the health care that they need, to make sure that our teachers have the tools they need to give our kids a great education, to make sure that people have access to affordable housing. These are not issues that can be separated as foreign policy in one bucket, domestic policy in another bucket. You'll hear a lot of promises from presidential candidates about all of the things that they want to do to help the people in this country. But unless we address the fact that trillions of dollars are going to pay for these wasteful regime change wars and this nuclear arms race, then we will not be able to serve those urgent needs of our people in our communities. That's just a fact. And this is why I raise this issue of the cost of war, because it is central to addressing all of these other urgent needs that are affecting our kids and our families and our neighbors and the very well-being of our communities. You can't separate it.
You supported Senator Sanders in his run in the last cycle. He's running again in 2020. Do you still support his efforts to be president? And if so, depending on how things shape out for both of you in the primary, would you work with him? Would you be potentially a vice presidential candidate to him or vice versa?
That conversation is a ways down the road. Bernie remains a good friend. I wish him well, and I think he brings an important voice to this national conversation that we're having about the direction of our future. I'm running for president because I bring a unique set of experiences, credibility, and skill set to that most important responsibility that the president has, which is to serve as commander-in-chief. Like I said, I've served in the military now for nearly 15 years in the Army National Guard. I've deployed twice to the Middle East, have many years of experience serving in the United States Congress, dealing with issues related to foreign affairs and the armed services, and am most qualified to walk in on day one and fulfill that responsibility of commander-in-chief.
Since we have a lot of folks that are of Indian descent that'll watch this particular program, I'm curious to know what your life has been like being raised as a Hindu, and following that and becoming the first Hindu American in Congress. We certainly have been following your progress since day one, since you got into Washington. A lot of folks take shots at you because of your Hindu identity, connecting you with extremists in India. Can you address some of that to some measure? Because I'd like to know in more granular detail, do you disavow some of the folks that may be anti-Muslim that are in India, folks that may want to have more of a Hindu nationalist stance within the subcontinent?
First of all, I'm an American. I don't come from any kind of Indian ancestry. I'm a soldier and I'm a patriot. I've taken one oath in my life as a soldier, and that is to serve and protect and uphold our Constitution and to serve our country. My election into the United States Congress as the first Hindu ever elected was something that at that time I don't think I fully understood the impact until I started to hear from people of all ages across the country and even from other parts of the world about what that meant to them. Even just the other day I was with a Hindu family, and their daughter was saying very nonchalantly now she knew that she could run for president. There was no doubt in her mind. There were barriers being broken down where previously fears of being otherized, fears of being ostracized, simply because they're Hindu, are falling away. They know that anything is possible, and they don't have to fear sharing their own Hindu faith with other people. The Hindu-phobic attacks that have been levied against me since that first time I ran for Congress, and which continue to this day, have to be denounced, just as we condemn all attacks based on religious bigotry, no matter where they come from or who they are targeting, whether they be against Hindus or Muslims or Christians or Catholics or Druze or atheists or Jewish people or whoever it is. We've got to stand united for the principles and freedoms that our country was founded upon, one of which is the freedom of religion. Unless we as Americans take this stand, condemning those attacks, condemning those Hindu-phobic attacks, then we will only see that kind of hatred and vitriol and bigotry continuing. It is an affront to our values as people in this country to allow these things to continue and to allow people to use religious bigotry as a political weapon. Like I said, in 2012, when I first ran for Congress, my Republican opponent at that time said Tulsi Gabbard should not be allowed to serve in Congress because her being a Hindu goes against the United States Constitution. Another Republican opponent in another year said a vote for Tulsi Gabbard is a vote for the devil because she's a Hindu. As I'm running for president now, these attacks against my Hindu practice, my character, questioning my loyalties as an American and as a soldier continue, but they should not be seen as anything other than what they are, which are religious, bigoted attacks that go against the principles of who we are as a country, and we need to stand up against them to stop it. Otherwise, it'll continue to spin out of control and end up hurting a lot of people in the process.
So if you're commander-in-chief and the Kashmir issue is in front of you, the issue between Israel and Palestine is in front of you, as well as dealing with the Middle East and dealing with Saudi Arabia and the influence that they have globally, what would you address first, and how would you address it? How would you address each situation? And you have 2 minutes to do it.
How much time do you have? Well, look, first of all, the issue between India and Pakistan is one that has to be addressed very carefully by both countries who have nuclear weapons. The seriousness of this and the need to act responsibly is paramount. It is something that impacts the people there and the people in the region and the whole world. Again, when we're talking about 2 nuclear-armed countries. Pakistan needs to address the fact that they have been and continue to support terrorists within their country. That's something that we cannot allow to continue, and that only Pakistan can really address. Look, I've been very outspoken on Saudi Arabia and the need for the United States to stop supporting Saudi Arabia, especially as we see them continuing to wage this genocidal war in Yemen that's killing tens of thousands of people with the United States support, causing millions of Yemeni civilians to starve and fall sick with different diseases and illnesses because they have no access to clean water or medicine or food. What to speak of the fact that Saudi Arabia continues to both directly and indirectly support terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, the very same terrorist groups that attacked the United States on 9/11, took thousands of people's lives, and that we are still trying to defeat in different parts of the world. Saudi Arabia is propagating their Wahhabi Salafist ideology that's fueling these terrorist groups in many different parts of the world. Saudi Arabia is not our ally. We should not pretend that they are, and we need to stop our support for them. With Syria, I've said it many times, and I'll continue saying it again. We need to stop our regime change war there and in other countries in the world. And people there, they need to be able to determine their own path for their own future. These are all tough situations, and it's difficult to see the hardship that people in these countries are facing in this situation in Syria, as it is with other countries in the world where our leaders are threatening regime change wars. Let's remember our history here, our recent history in places like Iraq and Libya and Syria, how United States regime change wars have made the suffering of the people in these countries far worse. There have been far more deaths, far more destruction. It has taken a heavy toll on our service members and our veterans. It has undermined our national security by strengthening terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and cost our people trillions of dollars that have come out of the pockets of every single person in this country, dollars that should be used and need to be used to serve their needs, like healthcare and infrastructure and education, things that we've got to address right here at home.
I think I have to leave it there, but finally, would you be open to having dialogue, having the United States open up dialogue in all of these areas to alleviate these issues?
Yes, it is so important for us and our leaders to have the courage to have conversations, to have tough conversations with people, whether they may be adversaries or potential adversaries, because we know and we understand that unless you have the courage to talk, the only alternative is war.
We will leave it right there. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, running for president in 2020.
Aloha.
Thank you very much. That's the public interest. We'll see you again next week.